Hey, Eagles fans, this is Chris Franklin from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to the No-Huddle Show podcast, the show where we discuss all things related to the Philadelphia Eagles. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that you can read all of our content on NJ.com/Eagles, and make sure to bookmark that to get the latest Eagles news and analysis. Today, I'm once again joined by my No-Huddle Show co-host Bob Brookover and Cayden Steele. Well, guys, we made it all the way through the summer and the downtime, but hey, we're here at training camp. We're recording this on a Tuesday, and the players are reporting to camp this morning, and we're getting to see everything. But before we get into that and delve into that, Cayden, Bob, how are you guys doing?
I'm doing well. Although, according to my calendar, there's still almost like 2 months left of summer.
It's crazy. This summer flew by.
Well, it didn't fly by. It's just that the NFL has made summer has stolen every month on the calendar. But that's okay because it's time and it's here and what a time to be excited about the Eagles training camp in terms especially after the way last year finished. But we're gonna get into all that. Hi, Cayden.
Hi, how you doing? I'm glad to be here as well. Like Bob said, summer's over. For us, not for everyone, but I'm excited. For this hot weather that we're about to be sitting out there in to watch the Eagles, but it's gonna be fun.
Nice, very, very nice. And we're going to go into the more Eagle stuff as we get along. But we're going to start out with this first. This came out once again, we're recording on a Tuesday. The news that former Eagles linebacker Haason Reddick, the Eagles traded to the Jets, will not be reporting to training camp this summer, and to start out with, and is going to be holding out for that. I'm going to start with you guys first. What's your initial reaction, and do you think the Eagles ultimately made the right move in trading Reddick?
I was waiting for the big chimes and the breaking news. It is the breaking news of the day for sure. And it's kind of looked like this all summer. He held out of their mandatory minicamp, their voluntary workouts. You have to wonder, at this point, if the Eagles knew that's what was going to be coming. And if you're the Jets, you have to wonder, or a Jets fan, you have to wonder, how could they make this trade without knowing that they were going to be able to get a deal done with Haason Reddick? Because, it's first of all, they're the Jets, and I know Eagles fans don't care very much about the Jets, but, you need things to go smoothly because you're the Jets, and you've not been to the playoffs longer than any other team in the NFL. I don't know how you let that happen if you're Joe Douglas. I just don't. And if I'm the Eagles, I've got Bryce Huff. A lot of people think he's a better pass rusher, although he's got a lot to prove in terms of being an every down edge player, or at least playing at least 50% of his team's defensive snaps, something he's only done once in his career. But you have to be, if you're Howie Roseman, saying, nope, don't have that headache. We're getting to the starting line with pretty much smooth sailing. He's got to be thrilled about that. So, that's my take on this whole thing.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Bob. The Eagles are probably, at this point, very happy that they're not having that distraction coming into training camp, and probably knew this was a strong possibility that he would hold out. We saw, last summer how, frustrated Haason was about, not having a new contract. And the fact that the Jets haven't got a deal done surprises me. You would think they would have something in place, or at least have an understanding of what he wants. So the fact that there is, some miscommunication, at least it seems, between him and the Jets front office, probably a little alarming if you're Jets fans who do, want things to go more smoothly this year, especially after how last season with Aaron Rodgers getting hurt. So more distractions in New York and less in Philly, and I think Howie Roseman will take that.
The thing I think about, the only downside I see to all this when it comes to the Eagles' impact is I wonder how many, because we know he has to have the 10 sacks and he has played, I believe, 63.5 or 70% of those snaps in order to be able for the Eagles to get that pick to be converted. And I'm starting to wonder, we saw what happened last year in terms of when Reddick was dealing with that hand, he got off to a slow start. and it really started to impact them. And I start to wonder now how will this affect that draft pick. I think Hassan Reddick to me is always going to be a double-digit guy, at least for the next 2-3 seasons, because he's just that good of a player. But looking more towards it now, it's just feeling like, I don't know, it's got this weird feeling that it may not get the snap. He'll get the sack indicator, but the snaps one is not going to come up. And I think it's going to, in the end, it's going to be like, okay, they got this draft pick, but I mean, I'm still on the boat. Like, I would have tried to find a way to re-sign him long-term and then give him his money. I think when you look at, I still have questions about this defense. We'll get into it more when we start talking about the team a little bit more. But I still have questions about these edge rushers. It's pretty thin. It's a lot of you're banking on a lot of guys who you haven't seen a lot of. So it's big questions. But you know what? The one thing is we don't have to cover a holdout. So that definitely helps all of us when it comes to that.
Those are great. Those are great points. That's just, I mean, from the Eagles' standpoint, yeah, you want that higher draft pick. But I think they'd trade the headache for the not having the headache for the higher draft pick at this point.
True. Now, getting back towards the Eagles, more Eagles foot-centric stuff. You're coming in. We're going to focus on this team, and it all starts with the quarterback. And Jalen Hurts is entering another season as the team's starter. And I'm going to ask you guys this. I'll start with you, Bob, on this question. What do you want to see from Jalen Hurts in training camp, and do you believe that he's going to take a step forward and rebound from last year, or do you think he's going to make or do you basically think we're going to see the same Jalen Hurts as we did beforehand?
Yeah, here's what I want to see. I want to see him coming in after what he said at the end of the mandatory mini camps. He basically said, "Hey, I'm learning a new offense here." He used the term 95% of it is new. I'm not sure how much of that is the case, but I want to see him come out and really have a good feel and mastery of Kellen Moore's offense. I don't expect it to be perfect. I think there'll be some learning curve still, and that maybe it won't be till 3-4 games into the season where he really has it down. But I want him to see him have a good grasp of it. He just it's a small sample size because they're not running many plays, and a lot of them are 7-on-7s. But he seemed like he was holding on to the ball a lot, and then when he was throwing, he wasn't real sure about where he was going with the ball. I thought during, maybe you guys saw it differently, but that's what I saw during the mandatory minicamp. I think we need to see him really have a great feel for the offense more than anything else, and being in command of the offense coming into training camp. I just think that whole aspect of things seemed to be lost with Jalen at the end of last season. Although I didn't think he played a horrible game against the Bucs. I just think it was more of, at that point, it didn't really matter what he did because the whole team was just in a bad place at that point. But I think you need to see a confident, if he is going to run. Let's see it. Don't hesitate. Don't, be sure about everything with this offense. I think that's what the Eagles need to see from him more than anything. And I think he's definitely capable of it. This is a guy who's he's been going through different coordinators and different play callers his entire career, starting with his freshman year in college. I think the number's 9 different play callers since his freshman year in college. So this is just another one, and he's a smart guy. He's, we all know he's an off the charts gym rat worker. So there's no reason that he shouldn't get there, and I think he will get there. So that's how I see him at this point.
Yeah, coming in, there's a few things that I want to see out of Jalen. And Bob mentioned, that if he does run, not to be hesitant. And, last season dealt with a knee injury in the middle of the year. And to be fair, even before that injury, I'm not sure if Jalen looked as explosive last year, as compared to past years when we've considered him arguably the best dual threat quarterback in the league other than Lamar Jackson. And that was a part of his game along with developing as, a really, really strong pocket passer. And, that element wasn't there last year, and defenses didn't have to stress as much. And a lot of that might have had to do with the injury. But it just never looked right. And, Jalen might be able to be successful without, running, because he did progress as a pocket passer over the last few years, but it's just an element that makes him even more dynamic. So you hope to see at least some of that return and have that element in the offense with, Saquon Barkley back there as well could make him, even better. And then along with that, one of the biggest problems with Jalen last year was the turnovers, the 15 interceptions, the careless fumbles. And it's training camp, so you don't want to overact to turnovers in training camp, because that is a time to kind of experiment and kind of see what works. So there's naturally going to be some sloppy practices, especially as they get used to Kellen Moore's offense. But you hope that he at least shows that that he's making smart decisions, and like Bob said, he's in control of the offense, and he's not super careless with the football, because they're not going to go back to the Super Bowl if he throws another 15 interceptions and fumbles the ball a ton. He just needs to be better in that area, and he has been in previous years. It seems like last year just something was off. And the other thing, is when he's not practicing, I mean, the most interesting thing, the thing for all of us and, for Eagles fans out there to see is how Jalen responds, to the recent reports out there from The Athletic, talking about how there is a disconnect, between him and Nick Sirianni, and how their relationships are work in progress. Obviously, after the whole awkward press conference, people try to read into, what Jalen, how he felt about Nick based off his answer of basically saying nothing that day, saying he didn't have an answer for how he's seen Nick in his new role, and then not really answering that well about what he's done well in that role when he was asked a follow-up question, saying that he's delivering great messages to the team. So the last month, it seems that's been, what everyone's been talking about. And then with the report from The Athletic, and then when the Inquirer's Jeff McClain also reported that some people at the top of the Eagles brass weren't happy with his answer. I'm just very curious how he handles himself, how he handles that question, and how he carries himself, And this is a pivotal year, and that relationship is something that's going to be monitored and scrutinized. And I'm just curious how Jalen comes out and talks about it.
You mentioned something about them not like Jalen's reaction, the reaction to Jalen's to Sirianni, Jalen's answer to Sirianni. I'll start with you with this one, Katie. Do you think Jalen's happy to be an Eagle?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to tell. I'd probably say yes, but he's not an easy guy to read. When the Eagles are winning a ton of games, like during 2022 and when they started 10-1, it's not like he's a jovial guy who's always laughing and joking and seems super happy. And it's just his personality. So it's tough to say whether he's happy to be an Eagle or not. I don't have anything that would indicate that he's not. Perhaps there is, a little, unease with him and Nick, and possibly he isn't the happiest with the situation with his coach. I guess, that's possible, especially with the recent reporting out there from The Athletic. And it makes you think that there's at least something there that could be an issue. I'll go yes for now, but I mean, he's a tough guy to read. He doesn't give you a lot of detailed responses, and he doesn't show a ton of emotion, which is fine. It's just, that's how he carries himself. He's just not super outgoing, and I don't expect that to change. I can't really read Jalen Hurts' mind, but there's a chance that, he's not happy with Nick. So that's probably not the best thing to have, but who knows?
What do you think, Bob? Are we going to see something about, are we going to hear something you think during training camp that Jalen's not happy to be Eagle? Or do you think he is happy to be an Eagle?
Well, I have to admit, because I think this thing with him and Nick was, in terms of what he said at that news conference, I think was blown way out of proportion. I really do. As I do what he said at the end of the season when he was asked about Nick's job security, basically said, I didn't know he was going anywhere. People want Jalen Hurts to say what they want him to say. They want him to be, this over the top, glowing endorsement And I don't think Jalen works that way. Jalen wants everybody to be on the same page, I think, and working as hard as he is, and forget about all the compliments. I think all Jalen Hurts wants to do is win. But I have to admit, I want to hear what he says because he's going to be asked about his comments at the end of the mandatory minicamp. I want to hear what he has to say, because it is a chance for him to, tamp down the drama of the whole thing by just saying, I'm on board with Nick Sirianni, something like that. But he doesn't have to go over the top and say, "Oh, Nick Sirianni is the greatest coach I've ever had," or I don't think it's as big a deal as people are making it out to be. Even the Athletic report, I hate reports that here's what I'm hearing from people. Here's what I hear. You know what? I'll ask both of you guys this: have you heard anybody put a name to complaints about Jalen Hurts? Anybody in the whole, and I'm not saying that some of them aren't real, but you know what? If you got a problem with Jalen Hurts, tell Jalen Hurts, or if you want to say it in the media, use your name, because the guys who don't have a problem with him are more than willing to put their name on it. And I think, are we allowed to curse on our podcast?
No, I'm still trying to find the bleep button, so I don't know. Think about that.
I think it's chicken. You know what to do it behind as a source. I think if you've got a problem, you know what, say it. Stand up and say it. Say it for the Eagles. The best case scenario is for him to say it to Jalen, so you can. I don't think Jalen's saying, "Hey, don't come to me with any of your complaints." I think he's more than willing. His whole career has been about winning. But it is going to be the first time Jalen is made available, and let's hope it's tomorrow. I doubt it will be, but maybe it will be. But it will be early here in training camp for sure. The first time he's available, he's going to be asked about it, and it'll be interesting to hear. But I'll stick by my thing that I think it's been blown way out of proportion.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I did this summer. I felt like I was doing the youth camp circuit with all these guys and seeing like them in different areas. And I made a point because I wanted to ask, especially after the press conference and the things of him being needed, a vocal leader and everything. I wanted to see what they truly felt about him. And a lot of these times, I got these guys away from anybody else so they wouldn't hear it or what have you, so they're pretty comfortable. And to a man, oh, thank you. I appreciate it. But to a man, everybody said that they were fine with him, and they think he's a leader, needs to be a leader when it comes time to it. I mean, Zach McPherson, probably gave the best to the thing. Like, he even said called the media out, saying Hurts was just he gets called out for even the littlest things. So paraphrasing there, but yeah, I think he's happy to be there. I think. Yeah, when it comes to doing obligations like talking to us and doing some other things, yeah, he's not the most forthcoming, but I've also heard from some guys as well too, even last season as well too, that Hurts is completely different. They've actually seen it. Hurts is completely different when you see him in the locker room, when he's talking to some of his guys and chilling out. Were there some detractors? Yeah. They were urban. I think one of them, I believe, and I can't say concretely, but one person I believe is no longer on his team anymore. So I think that's where one source that people went to a lot, and that's where they got that from. So I think from there on out, I think he's half free Eagle. I think he's going to be here for at least a few years, even if this team struggles and the offense looks bad. I think they clean house first in the coaching ranks, and then they still keep Hurts and give him one more chance, and then start to look to go another option if he struggles or he comes down to something like that. But yeah, I think Hurts is going to be here to stay for at least another few years before, unless something drastically changes. But like I mentioned beforehand, if something drastically changes, the coaches get cleaned house. Speaking of coaches, Nick Sirianni is going to have a new role this year. He's not going to be dabbling into the offense as much as he has in the past. He's taking more of a CEO role now in terms of overseeing more defensive stuff, offensive stuff, similar to guys like Mike Tomlin with the Pittsburgh Steelers and John Harbaugh of the Baltimore Ravens. And so I'm going to go to you, Bob. What do you think is Nick Sirianni's most important role as a CEO head coach?
to get the ship going in the right direction again. You mentioned two great ones. You know, if you look at the 21st century, how many coaches would you put ahead of John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin in terms of being success stories? I guarantee you don't need more than two hands, and you may not need more than one to list the number. I think those guys are both high. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. John Harbaugh's won a Super Bowl. You know, he's had some disappointments in the playoffs the last 6-7 years, but his team's always, you know, in the mix as one of the top teams in the league. You know, those are two great examples. That history's, you know, it's a myth that CEO head coaches don't have a role. And I can remember, even this is going back to when Jeffrey Lurie was interviewing, Jeffrey Lurie and Joe Banner were interviewing Andy Reid. You know, the thing that stood out to them was that Andy Reid came in so prepared, and I think they were. I know they were somewhat surprised because he had never been more than a quarterback's coach, but he had that famous book of his, you know, the thick binder that mapped out everything he wanted to do as a head coach, and that's exactly what Jeffrey Lurie is looking for in a head coach, is a CEO type guy. Now it's you know, Nick Sirianni's obviously his offensive prowess with the Colts, and before that with the Chargers, obviously had some influence. But I think anytime Lurie interviews anybody, and same with Howie Roseman, that they're looking for that CEO quality in a head coach. And now it's Nick Sirianni's chance to show that that's what his strength is. You know, he likes to call it his core values. It gets a little what's the word? Campy, I guess, sometimes when he talks about them, a little over the top. But you know, that's what he's trying to bring, is get this ship that sank last year back afloat and moving on the right course. And if he does that, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats, and he'll get plenty of credit. And if he doesn't, a sinking ship gets the head coach fired. So, you know, we'll see which way it goes. But I think just him having everything on board, and I think, you know, we'll go back to the Jalen point. For him and Jalen to show unity early on in this training camp would go a long way toward that. But you know, Chris, you've been around him more than any of us. You know what his personality is. It's a fiery personality. But I think everybody, at least I've talked to him, maybe you've got guys that I don't even have, you know, feel like it's genuine. You know, it's not some act. So, you know, we'll see where he goes. It's obviously a pivotal season for him, but it's hard to argue his success. I mean, you know, I wrote yesterday or for this morning about how, you know, Nick talked about how he doesn't really plan on making training camp this torturous thing because the Eagles fell apart last year. And his point was, you know, we're a pretty good starting team. And then you go and look it up. And through the first 11 games over the last two seasons, this team is 20-2. The next closest is the Chiefs at 17-5. And, you know, obviously the Chiefs have finished better by winning consecutive Super Bowls. But anytime you're doing anything better over a 22-game stretch than the Chiefs, you're probably doing something right. So we'll see.
You're right about the whole the fiery aspect. He's very, very, I'll see how I put this, very competitive. I'll leave it at that, because different times he'll go inside. He was not afraid to call out his coaches. I'll say that from a couple current and former coaches that have been on his staff, that he's been a little fiery, and he demands excellence at some point, even down to a detail, like certain details on certain things, like offensively and defensively. He's a stickler for details, but I'll leave it at that. And he wants things done a certain way, so he's a little he's a fun. There's maybe some yelling happening here and there from a few times from that one. But you know what? Speaking of that, we're going to go more towards the players. We talked about Jalen and Nick Sirianni. Let's go talk about some of the other parts of this team that are going to be important in order for the long-term success of this team. And part of those positions, including certain battles. So, Cayden, I'm going to ask you this: What position battles do you think will be the most interesting to watch coming up, and what should we have our eyes on?
Yeah, the number one battle that will be the most fascinating to me is the cornerback position. With the amount of depth that they've acquired at that position, especially at the top, with Quinton Mitchell coming in as a first-round pick and Cooper DeJean coming in as their second-round pick. You get Isaiah Rodgers after his suspension was lifted as well. There is so much depth in this corner room. There's a job on the outside open across from Darius Slay. Will that go to Quinton Mitchell, who seems to be probably the favorite coming into training camp because of the draft status and because of just his ability that he showcased throughout the pre-draft process? Looked like was the top cornerback drafted. You figured that he'll probably start, but at the same time, you got a guy like Keely Ringo who's in his second year in the building, and I'm not sure if he'll be the opening day starter. Probably not, but at the same time, he had a really strong spring, and if you could feel good about him in a possible role going in the future. And then Isaiah Rodgers was one of the standouts in the spring as well. With Slay and DeJean, there's like 5 cornerbacks to me at least that you could feel pretty excited about going forward, and it'll be interesting to see how it works out and who's the three starting corners. Who's going to be the nickel? Will it be DeJean, and will the outside guy be Mitchell? Will you start 2 rookies, or will you go with a different pairing? And it speaks to the depth of the corner room. There's guys like Avonte Maddox, who also cross-trained at safety during the offseason programs. He's a guy that most years you would think of as one of the best nickels in football, or kind of up there. And right now, I can't say that he's definitely a roster lock, even though I do think the versatility of him playing safety and corner will help him. And then you have guys at the end of this roster who were your third and fourth corners last year, or your top backup outside guys like Eli Ricks, who came into that Dolphins game and he looked really good when he first started getting some snaps. And yeah, he had some rough moments last year, but that's what most rookies go through as well. And the fact that he was willing to play in the slot, and when he's traditionally an outside guy in college playing on the boundary, showcased his versatility and his willingness to learn. And you got a guy like Josh Jobe, who's known for being just an excellent special teams player, and he's at the back end of the roster. And that's without even saying Tyler Hall, who's played a lot of snaps in this league on that Raiders defense, and he's been a solid contributor. There is so much depth. And Chris, I forgot the guy that you talked to for the Jalen story, Zach McPherson, who's been a quality backup special teams player as well. Like, there's going to be a lot of good players on this football team in that back end who don't make this roster, who might end up being claimed by another team when it comes to the waiver wire at the end of August. So that's one. And then the other one that intrigues me the most, and probably not for good reason, is the linebacker position, because there's not a current linebacker on this team that I feel good about. Right now, the one that everyone seems to be counting on, or at least slotting in as a starter, is Devin White, coming from Tampa Bay. I mean, he hasn't had a good year. He hasn't been good in a while, honestly. And even when he was at his best, he was pretty inconsistent. Yeah, he has the one All-Pro season in 2020, but he's just never really put it together. And it's hard to believe. I mean, it's possible with Vic Fangio, but at the same time, it's hard to believe that a change of scenery is really going to change a player that's been mediocre to bad at times and to being, a really, really reliable linebacker. I'm just not sure if I can believe in that. And then same with Nakobe Dean coming in. A lot of expectations coming into last year, but the 2 foot injuries, those have to concern you. The fact that he missed a ton of time, and then when he did play, he wasn't all that great. So it's just tough right now. And if you want to believe that, Zach Bond can possibly fill that role, I mean, perhaps, but the Saints, didn't use him as a full-time starter, and they didn't bother, really trying to bring him back. He wasn't a top priority for him. So it's tough to believe that anyone in this linebacker room is really going to emerge and become a quality starter. I mean, right now, that's my biggest concern coming into this year overall.
And, you mentioned when you talk about the cornerback spot, I think that's going to be something really to watch, not only in terms of who makes the initial roster, who makes in terms of who makes the roster, but how many guys they keep at that spot, because it's going to be a juggling act. I mean, I don't think we'll see stuff like last year where all of a sudden 4 tight ends make the roster, but they're going to have some difficult decisions. Do you go light, say it, off the ball linebacker? Do you go light at another position just to try to make sure that you keep some of these guys and make sure they go through waivers? It's one of those times where you really wish to be the fly on the wall inside those last days when they're cutting down the roster. It's going to be extremely, extremely tough in terms of that. Now, one guy we know who's going to be on this roster will not be cut is running back Saquon Barkley. The free agent, the prize signed free agent, who we've seen now, thanks to the Hard Knock series, how he came to become an Eagle, which that opened up a lot of eyes watching that. I'm going to go to you, Bob, on this one. What should we expect from Saquon this season?
Well, it's kind of fun because I had Saquon on both ends of this. Going to have Saquon's on both ends of this. I lived through his negotiations with the Giants last year. He did have a contract out there last year that was similar to the one he got from the Eagles. I don't think it was quite as good, although we never really got the full details of what the Giants offered last year. But it was clear this year that the Giants weren't going to pay him what the Eagles are willing to pay him, and that the Eagles really wanted this guy. There's so many fascinating aspects to the Hard Knocks thing. I think, Chris, you were just endorsing Eagles Hard Knocks there by saying you wanted to be a fly on the wall with all those things. But there were so many fascinating things to that whole thing, including that it sounded like the Texans offered him more money, but he wanted to be closer to his home in the Harrisburg area where he grew up, where his family is still. To me, he's the most exciting skill position free agent, at least. Or addition, not just free agent, because T.O. wasn't a free agent. He was an addition since T.O., and we're going back how many years? That's 20 years. We're going back to get a guy that can create this much excitement in a franchise. And I think he's that special a player. I think he's every bit as special as T.O. I think his growth was, again, this is a guy watching the Giants offensive line firsthand, that he put up the numbers he put up last year in New York with that offensive line. I think they were special numbers. And you got to remember, he also missed 3 games with a high ankle sprain. I just think this guy is so eager to show what he is and what he can be at his absolute best. Obviously, you always got to stay healthy. That's true for every player. But I just think he's a special, special player. The other guy you go back to, the last running back the Eagles brought in was this type of guy was Ricky Watters, and he was special for the Eagles for 3 years. The Eagles weren't nearly as good a team as they are now. I just think this is the kind of guy that can turn this offense into between having him and Kellen Moore as additions. I think this Eagles offense could be the best in the NFL this season. I really do believe that. And I know the 49ers are a great offense. I know the Dolphins have a great offense. There's some great quarterbacks out there, but I think this Eagles offense has a chance to be the best in the league.
Well, it really could be a strong suit, but there also are going to be there are some aspects of this team that are a little concerning, and there's definitely some questions about that. I'll start with Cayden with this one too. What do you think we should be most concerned about this team with heading into training camp?
Yeah, for me, kind of going back to what I talked about last was the linebacker group and the middle of the defense potentially getting exposed. We looked at the linebackers last year with Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham and adding in Shaq Leonard. At the end of the year, it was not a good group, specifically going back to that San Francisco game where the Eagles got demolished. They took advantage of the middle of the defense, running Debo across the middle, McCaffrey, Kittle, and the Eagles just had no answers. And yes, I know they have Vic Fangio now, who's a better and more experienced defensive play caller than what they had last year, and and Sean Desai and Patricia and those guys. So it should be overall pretty improved from that regard. From a scheme perspective, you would hope that he's able to come up with some answers, even though there could be some limitations. But at the same time, I'm not all that confident that the pairing of Devin White and Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond is that much better than what they had last year. There might be more potential, because if you believe or hope that maybe Devin White's athleticism, which, he is a really good athlete, coming out of LSU, everyone expected him to be, a top end linebacker. And at times he's flashed that in Tampa Bay, but he never consistently put it together. But if he does, maybe this middle of this defense is really good. But like I previously said, I have a hard time believing that. And then with Nakobe Dean, will he even stay healthy after, the 2 injuries he suffered last year? The knock on him coming out, the reason that he supposedly fell to the 3rd round was because of injury concerns and being undersized. He hasn't done anything necessarily to prove that, wrong so far. So with the linebacker group, and then even in, just overall in the middle of the defense, I feel pretty good, about the safeties for the most part, especially with Chauncey back there. But Reed, Blankenship, and Sidney Brown still have a lot to prove, coming into this year, especially with Sidney coming off the ACL. There is some potential matchups there during the season where coaches may be able to take advantage of that middle of the defense, especially if they don't show up the linebacker spot. And it could get ugly. I mean, especially teams who have really smart play callers like Kyle Shanahan. We saw that last year, and we'll see what happens. But that position could be the reason that the Eagles defense, even though the secondary is improved and you're excited about Bryce Huff and all these different pieces on the D-line, Jalen Carter potentially taking a next step, but it could be the reason that maybe it doesn't, end up being a top half of the league defense, even though maybe, Fangio could get him there. It could hold him back.
All right. What do you think, Bob?
Well, yeah, I think the top answer here has to be the inside linebacker spot. I mean, this was an astonishing figure to me. At the Eagles in their first 8-9 games last year gave up more than 100 yards rushing once. And then after that, starting with the Chiefs game, 168, 173, 146, 138, 100, 106, 221 to the Arizona Cardinals, 109, 119. And that's a reflection, it's a reflection of the entire defense. But, the linebackers are the guys who are charged with mostly stopping the run. Now, I think, the fall off some of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter a little bit, can fall in there. But I think it's more on the linebackers. So I think, that's the spot that should be the most concerning for the Eagles going in here. And another guy who I guess could figure in this, although he's never really been a starter in the league, but he was forced into the Super Bowl last year, is Oren Burks, after Trey Greenlaw, that strange injury he had running onto the field. But the other guy who maybe has a chance to really show something as a rookie is Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Who knows? You never know who's going to pop up here, but that's a wide open room. And really the Eagles need Devin White to be. He's coming off the worst season of his career. That they need him to be something special. I think the other area of concern is probably if you go to the offensive side is Tyler Steen at right guard. Not as concerned about Cam Jurgens. I did an interesting study of the Eagles 21st century centers this year. I mean, in preparation for tomorrow. Listen to this list. The Eagles, and this is a lot of because of Jason Kelce played 193 regular season games and another 12 playoff games, 205 games he played from 2011 through last year. But they played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Only 9 guys have played center for the Eagles in the 21st century. I'll go down the list and listen to how unheralded they were. Bubba Miller, 16 games in 2000, undrafted. He was replaced by Hank Fraley, undrafted, who played 71 regular season games, 10 playoff games, including the Super Bowl. I got to admit, I don't remember Jim Pine's one game as a starter. That came in 2001 when he was a 7th rounder. That came in 2001. I was actually at that game, and I don't remember it because it came against Tampa Bay when the Eagles had already locked up a playoff spot, and it had no implication. But Hank Fraley, in the middle of the 2005 season, was replaced because of injury by an undrafted Jamal Jackson, who started the next 71 games. He started 72 overall, played in 6 playoff games. Terrific player as an undrafted player. And he got hurt late in that 2009 season, the next to last game of the season. And Nick Cole replaced him for the final game of 2009, and then in the playoff game against the Cowboys. Neither one of those games went particularly well for the Eagles. He was an undrafted. So now we got 4 undrafted and a 7th rounder, played center. Mike McGlynn was the 2010 center after Jackson got hurt again. He started 14 games, 1 playoff game. Also, that playoff game again. Then Kelsey comes along, plays the next 193 out of of 207, I guess, 209 maybe. He obviously a 6th round pick. The only other guys to play were Dallas Reynolds. He was a late round pick. McGlynn was a 4th round pick. He was the highest of all the players. They were all 3rd day picks if you go by the way things are done today. And then in 2014, David Mulk played 4 games for Kelsey when he's hurt. He was a 7th round pick. So they all 3rd day picks. Now they got Cam Jurgens. It took me a long way to get here, but now they got Cam Jurgens, who's a 2nd round pick. You know, they've never had a guy better pedigree coming out of college than this guy in the 21st century. And I think he's going to be fine. The question will be Tyler Steen at right guard, and can anybody take that job from him? We'll see.
You know, it's funny when hearing that list. It means to me, I'm going to say this jokingly, it means one of 2 things. Either Cam Jurgens is going to stick around for a very long time, or Dylan McMahon has a real shot of actually seeing some time on this thing where they were all selected. So it's crazy in terms of that.
That's a great point.
Conversely, now I'll say, I'll stay with you, Bob. Conversely, what do you think will be the biggest surprise at camp? Jeremiah
Trotter would be on that list if he were able to do it, but the guy I'm going to go with is, that number 3 wide receiver is wide open, and he's not necessarily a prototypical slot guy who is shifty, but I liked watching him a little bit in training camp. Johnny Wilson, he's a big guy. And you get him down there near the end zone in the red zone. You want to play jump ball. I'd like to see it. Joseph Nagata is also kind of in that big guy range, but I think Johnny Wilson's got a chance to maybe have more of an impact than we think going in.
How about you, Cayden? Who do you think is going to be the biggest surprise?
Yeah, there's a few guys that have been kind of mulling, but the one that I think would be categorized as a big surprise is, I've hammered the linebacker position throughout this episode, saying there's not a lot of quality options there. They're either proven or have been, really productive in the last couple of years. But the one guy that maybe, it's probably more of a far shot, but because of the athleticism and some of the stuff that you just can't teach, a guy like Ben Van Sumeren does have an opportunity. Like right now, I wouldn't go as far as say I don't think he's a roster lock at all, but this linebacker chart, depth chart, shouldn't be settled one bit. And if he comes into training camp and shows that he's improved as a football player and he's picked up Vic Fangio's defense, and along with the athleticism, which I don't think will go away, he might be the most, naturally athletic, linebacker that the Eagles have. So with the fact that there's not a lot of, good options, if he comes out and has a good training camp, maybe he is that 3rd linebacker. Maybe he even carves into some of the starting snaps. He looked good in a short amount of time. I know he didn't play a lot last year, but in that Giants game on Christmas, I thought he looked pretty solid. And there's an opportunity there, and he's a good athlete, and he'll contribute on special teams as well. There's a big role for him potentially if he gets there.
I love that pick. He's a Spartan. Spartans will. That's what they say.
I'll throw his name out there real quick. Kendall Milton, the running back out of Georgia. He's an undrafted rookie. I don't think there's a path for him to make this team just because of all the other positional needs, but I think he's going to be one of those guys that stands out. It's going to be kind of tough to keep on this roster because I think he's, especially against those third-team guys, I think he's going to stand out pretty well. On top of that. But finally, I will get to this last question that we have going to here. And I'll start with you, Bob, on this one. Give me one bold prediction that you think will happen for this season.
All right, I'm going to go to where you were talking earlier. You have concerns about the edge rushers, and my bold prediction is that Jalen Hunt will play a bigger role than any of us expect this year. He was a third-round pick. He's a guy that, from a small school that people expect him to need time to develop his NFL level play. But I've seen guys like this surprise before. I'm a big fan of Houston Christian because, I know a lot about that school. But, I'll go back to, I forget what year it was. I think it was 2005. And, nobody expected Trent Cole to do much for the Eagles. And I'm sure it was 2005. And, things didn't go well for that team. But he emerged as a guy and became one of the team's best pass rushers in franchise history. I don't know if Jalen Hurts is going to become that, but I do think he's a special kind of athlete just by watching him a little bit in the spring. I think he's got a chance to be more of a – and I think these small school guys come with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and I do like that. So I'm eager to see if he can flash in training camp in the preseason and show himself a little bit.
If he does, I wonder if Howie comes out wearing a big Pimpin that would be kind of funny to watch on that one. Cayden, what do you think? What's your bold prediction?
Yeah, let's stick with the edge rusher theme. I won't go with Jalen Hunt, but I'll go with the guy that a lot of people are uncertain of what he is. And I mean, so am I. So this will quantify it as being bold is Nolan Smith by the end of training camp will show improvements as a pass rusher. Will have more of a pass rush plan. Believe that he's a hard worker and will come into camp looking like more of a complete player, going along with his really impressive athleticism. And there's a chance, especially with Josh Sweat becoming a free agent after the 2024 season with the restructured deal and him getting shopped during the off season, that he carves into his snaps, heading into the season, that it's more of a 50-50 than we currently would think. We would think no one's kind of that third or fourth guy, and that maybe a step up would be just being a solid rotational pass rusher, but maybe there's a chance because of the contract situation with Sweat, and if he does improve, which I do expect him to do because of how he works and his approach and all those things, it just makes me feel like there is something there. And I believed in him when they drafted him. I thought he was a really good prospect coming out, that he kind of overtakes Josh Sweat a little bit, especially after how Josh Sweat played at the end of last season. It might have had to do a lot with the defense, and just everyone kind of regressed at the end of last year. But he didn't exactly, look that great at the end of last year. He really struggled getting after the quarterback. So there's an opportunity for Nolan to get a big role and maybe even take some from Josh Sweat.
Nice. Very, very nice. I had to make one myself. I know this is going to be weird, and I know on top of that, I think John Ross winds up having more receiving touchdowns than Dallas Goedert. Only reason why I say that is I think Ross can be a really good big play guy. Something where if you get the right matchup, especially if you get him in motion, which Kellen Moore likes to do, he'll give you, I think, at least 3 or 4 touchdowns on the deep ball. We all know how Hurts loves to go attack deep. So I think that's one guy that I'm looking at and thinking that, okay, that. And I think, especially if you get down in the red zone, the Eagles really look at, it's like A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Devontae Smith, and if you get down to the 1 yard line, everybody knows what play they're going to run. So it's one of those things. I think, and I'm not saying it's going to be a big thing. I think it may be like 4-3 or 5-4, what have you. But I think that's where I'm going with bold prediction. I think Ross is going to be a good addition to this receiving core in terms of that. All right, well, guys, we've made it. This is the end of the podcast. You make sure to follow us everywhere. NJ.com/Eagles. We're going to have all of our training camp coverage on that. We're going to be turning out more podcasts as well, too. Now that the season's back up and running, we're going to have more podcasts, so make sure to subscribe to us and continue to listen. So for Bob and Cayden, I'm Chris. Everybody have a good one. See ya.